So Season 2 of Delta Force recently released, and with it brought a few new weapons. So that means we have some new weapons to make builds for. So in this video, we're going to go over the lowest recoil or highest control build for the new SMG, the QCQ171, which is a new 9mm SMG with some pretty interesting possibilities. Now, one of the most interesting parts of this new SMG is that you're able to change its bolt, and there's actually some pretty interesting choices to be made here. So you can go with the stable bolt that massively increases most of the stats of the weapon, also heavily increases the effective range, which is super nice, but you reduce your handling by a little bit, and you pretty heavily reduce your fire rate. So with the stable bolt, you only have a 694 RPM, or you can go with the rapid bolt that massively reduces pretty much all the other stats of this weapon, but increases its fire rate up to 848, which is pretty massive. So you're basically choosing, do you want to shred in close range, or do you want the weapon to be usable in all the other ranges? Personally, I would probably not use the rapid bolt in most situations, just because you get so many different stat increases, and the effective range increase with the stable bolt is really nice, especially for an SMG that generally doesn't have very good range anyway. Then going to our other parts, the barrel, we're going to be using the new type red tassel tactical long barrel, just going to give you the most stats possible. There is the possibility of an integrated silencer with this weapon, and while this isn't the best for stats, I think this is probably going to be pretty good for being more cost effective, because I think just going with one of the other barrel options and then a silencer on top of that is going to be a lot more expensive and not give you a ton of additional stats. So that may be a possibility if you're trying to use a cheaper build. Then for the barrel device, we're going to be using the titanium contest muzzle brake. Now this isn't going to be silenced, so you're obviously going to be much louder, and you're going to have the muzzle flash, so it's going to be harder to stay on target. But if you're trying to get the highest control, this is best. If you're trying to go with the silencer, I'd recommend the advanced multi-caliber suppressor. Reduces the control a bit and the stability by a small amount, but most of the other suppressors also massively reduce the handling, and you already have low handling if you're using the full control build of this weapon. Then for the foregrip, we're going to be using the resonant ergonomic grip because this reduces the recoil. And one of the interesting things you'll notice about this weapon when we go to the firing range is it actually has a decent bit of recoil for being a maxed out control SMG. You can even see here that it actually has a bit of horizontal and vertical. Now I've done some testing with all the different options, and I think this is still going to be best getting that vertical reduction, because if you go horizontal, it just has too much vertical recoil. But from testing this against the other 9mm SMGs, while this weapon does actually have more recoil, it doesn't have as much shake that usually comes with increasing your stability, but the other full built 9mm SMGs always have that much higher shake. So once you get more used to using this SMG, you should be able to control the recoil better and not have to worry about that shake that a lot of 9mm SMGs have. Then on the magazine, we're just going to have the mag assist to give some additional handling. Now you can get a 45 round extended mag on this instead of the 30 rounder, but you lose 8 handling. And in this specific build, if you're going for the highest control, I wouldn't recommend that. We already have a low handling. But if you're using a different version of this build, maybe you're augmenting it yourself, 45 rounder may be worth it, especially if you're going in, say, a normal operation. Then for the stock, we're going to be using the Your Spec tactical stock, and that's going to be able to put us to the 100 control. Now I think we are slightly over 100 control, but there's no other good options to get to that maxed out control with this. And then for the pistol grip, we're going to be using the new type sword heavy grip, and this is just going to give you a lot of control and a lot of stability. And then for the sight, you can use whatever you want. I just use the panoramic red dot just so I can keep the same sight across all my different weapons. But this SMG should actually be able to use a little bit of more medium range sights because you have the less damage fall off for some of our parts. And that's actually something that's also interesting with this SMG. It actually has a much better damage fall off in terms of keeping your damage at longer ranges than pretty much all of the other 9mm SMGs. So you're also going to have that going for you. And then for our 3 handguard patches, we're just going to be increasing our stability because that does a similar thing to control. Like I mentioned, that'll help with the bounce that a lot of other SMGs have, and we already have max out control, so might as well put that into stability. Now, when you're calibrating your weapon, it's really going to come down to exactly what you want and how you like to play. Now, me personally, I do use the panoramic red dot sight a lot. And what I'll do is I'll max out the zoom so it has a little bit more zoom. And then I'll fully reduce the eye relief. Now, what that does is it brings your FOV closer to the sight. So if you up this eye relief, your FOV would be farther away from the sight. Now, this doesn't directly affect zoom, but I do think it generally helps. You're using a red dot sight and I want a little bit more range and just a little bit more focus while using it. So this is generally what I use with pretty much every weapon. Now, one thing I actually don't know is if changing the calibration helps the control past going to 100. I don't know if anybody's really tested that, because with most weapon builds, you don't get to 100 control. You'll usually remove some of that to get some stability or handling. So I'm not actually sure, but generally with barrels, I just max them out because it gives you more control and it gives you range and muzzle velocity, which is something I like. But then for the other parts with this SMG, but then for the foregrip, I just max out the weight limit because it gives extra control. Then for the rear grip, we just max out our weight limit again, more control. It just reduces aiming stability while breathing, which isn't too bad. And then for the stock, again, weight limit for the extra control. Now, if it turns out that getting extra control on calibration doesn't change your control after 100, I would probably just reduce all of these to 0 if you're going to be using this actual weapon. Now, if you're using a weapon that's more balanced, which I will be doing another video on the best overall build, this is definitely what I'd still be using to get more control while not having the 100 control, because that obviously would guarantee work. Now for our ammo options, we have white all the way up to purple. Now if you're using any decently built weapon, I would definitely not be using white or green ammo. I would definitely at minimum be using the blue ammo. Now what's interesting with 9mm and it's kind of unique with 9mm is you have both leg ammo and armor penning ammo. Rip ammo is for legs, it doesn't pen anything, but if you shoot in any extremities, so arms or legs, it does a lot more base damage. And then AP 6.3 is obviously for armor penning. Pens up to tier 3, but generally in Delta Force, I don't think leg ammo is very good, especially with how many kind of head glitches you have or peeks around corners. You can very easily just peek around corners and you're pretty much only showing like one arm and no legs generally. So it's much harder to use leg ammo in this game. I would generally never recommend using it. So you're probably going to either want to be using the AP 6.3, which is the blue armor penning, or the PBP, which is the purple penning, which is penning up to tier 4. And this ammo is generally cheaper than a lot of the other rounds, both the AP 6.3 and the PBP. PBP is obviously going to be pretty expensive still at 1600. And even something like AP 6.3, because SMGs usually have higher fire rate, they're usually pretty good in close quarters, it's still going to be pretty good. Now, if you're using the absolute full build we're going over in this video, you're probably going to want to be using purple ammo. Just make sure to put all of the extra in your secure container and just reload from that if you're not trying to lose a stack of 60 of this, which is obviously going to be very expensive. So that's the entirety of the QCQ171's highest control build. And this SMG is really interesting like we went over. You have a lot of new options. And even though this SMG at 100 control has more recoil than the other fully built 9mm SMGs, this SMG actually does have a longer range, so it has less damage fall off. And like I went over, it has less of that bounce that stability would usually increase. So if you can control your recoil a little bit better, this may end up being the best medium range SMG in the game, at least for 9mm. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.